We're here. No drama, very calm. Welcome to Thursday. Melissa, I credit your legal, logical mind with keeping me just a little more rational.
I think
I mean,
We're running like
oh
a Swiss
gosh.
train. That's
Yeah. Yep. Nope. Last week I kind of had a little bit of a breakdown with my poor manicurist Chelsea. So this week I'm just, welcome to Thursday. We are
Yay.
we are really, really delighted because we have a good friend joining us, and it's, I think, going to be a really fascinating conversation because she is the other half to a previous conversation we had with Dr. Grant Severson. This is Melissa Burkland. And I'm just so thrilled you joined us, Melissa, because
Yes,
I'm
me too.
really looking forward to your side of the story. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, it's an honor to be here. So thank you so much for having me as a guest. I'm excited.
Yeah, so Grant was one of our first
Yeah.
conversations, and we talked about
Yeah.
with Grant that great moment where Grant told me how he knew Maz. We were at a CSA party, and I offered him a glass of wine, and he said, "No, I'm good." He said, "I know Maz," and I said, "How do you know Maz?" "From Saturdays." And it didn't dawn on me. And he said, "Saturday mornings." And I'm literally holding a bottle of wine, and I went, "Oh, so great." I just had that kind of panicky moment, and he was so gracious about it. But then we got to meet you too. I mean, I had met you
Yes.
through CSA at the Arts Partnership, but I just didn't, you don't start most meetings with, "Hi, I'm also the spouse of an alcoholic."
Right. Not what you lead with usually.
No,
So,
definitely not, unless you're us, I guess, and now we do. But
right.
but then, we had dinner together, socially distanced outdoor dinner together this summer, and I have written about that evening because it was so profound for us
Yeah.
to have dinner with another couple who were in the exact same spot that we are in, and really for almost the exact same amount of time.
I know. That's what really strikes me about our friendship with you guys is because I feel we both met in 2001, like on or right before September 11th. We
Yep.
got married around the same time. Grant
Yep.
and Mass have been sober around the same time.
Right.
So like all of our mile markers match up, which is really neat. But and I do remember hearing about that. And it still strikes me that almost every time I hear that somebody's in recovery or somebody has a spouse in recovery, I still almost have this like immediate sense of disbelief of like, oh no, that couldn't really be.
Right.
And it's neat when we start talking about it, I feel like that kind of feeling of like, no, I'm still the only one that's going through this. That slowly lessens. And that's what's really neat about it. And I still remember telling Grant after he shared kind of the interaction he had with you is I was like, oh, well, they must have met after Maz was sober because Dana is far too put together to be a part of a couple.
Tolerated
that
that kind of behavior.
No.
Yeah, so I feel like you have this sense of wanting to like protect and isolate somebody from going through that. And then also like, I think it's also my own insecurity of like feeling the world has to be watching and knows kind of these demons we've struggled with. But so I just, that's kind of a roundabout way of saying I so appreciate both of you bringing these conversations kind of out in the open, because I think, the more we talk about it, the more we erode that stigma of, this is a terrible disease that we should never talk about. So it's great how.
Well, thank you for that. That's lovely. But not only do we need to keep eroding the idea that it's a terrible disease, but more importantly, I think we need to keep eroding the idea that the person who chose this disease is a terrible person.
Yes.
And, because that's not the case. And I think that's some of why, and correct me if you disagree with this, Melissa, but I think as a spouse, that's some of why it was so hard to talk about it, is for the exact reason that you said, well, they must have met afterwards because Dana wouldn't have tolerated that. I did tolerate it. You tolerated it. And boy, if we're going to talk about me being accomplished, shut the front door. I'm not, you are highly, highly accomplished. And I loved when Grant talked about, Grant talked about himself like he was, like I use a metal detector and try and find precious metals
Yeah.
that kind of cashed in, like he was not really much to talk about. And when I kind of
Yeah.
teased him about that, he talked about, your incredible competency too. So I think that just between the four of us, there's a lot of education. There's a
There
lot
is.
of
Yeah.
accomplishment. And there is this um, reality that these two really brilliant, fabulous men also
Yep.
have this addiction. And that these
Yep.
two, I'm going to just say, fabulous women met them.
I'll take it.
Yep, met them, took it in, lived with it,
Yep.
tried to balance it, tried to absorb it, tried to fix it, because you're a fixer like I
Yes.
am. And then
Yep.
and then worked through it and are working
Mhm.
through it. It's not a past tense thing.
Right.
It's a lifetime thing.
Yes.
And I
Yep.
think,
Absolutely.
I honestly think because of the two of you, the four of us came through it nice and shiny.
Yeah, that's kind of
It's
you
true.
to
I
say.
do think that.
That's generous of you, Matt. Thank you.
It's true. Well, it's a disease that affects families, and if families can deal with it together, they shine together if they can survive.
Yep, I completely agree. And I know I listened to the conversation you had with Chelsea last weekend, or last week, which was beautiful and very relatable. And I think to the credit of the treatment center that Grant went to, it was First Step Recovery. They also had a family program that worked exclusively kind of on a parallel track with family members of patients who were in treatment. And there was a lot of similarities between her experience and my experience with treatment. And it was so refreshing to kind of be in a room of people who were really going through the same thing at the same time as you. And I think I sort of fell under this illusion that alcohol was the problem. And as soon as we eliminated that, everything was going to be perfect. And you don't kind of realize like how sucked into, this whole disease process that you get to too. And so I mean, it's really hard to look at yourself in the mirror and kind of recognize the way that, you've evolved and changed in negative ways throughout somebody's addiction. And kind of to unravel that, I think takes just as much processing as somebody who's actually going through treatment. And so that was a healthy thing for me to do. I've also always had this fear that as soon as people know Grant's an alcoholic, they'll consider him very one-dimensional and only think of that, which is totally wild when I think of that, because I would never assume that about anybody else I know who's in recovery. And at the moment you meet Grant, you realize he's just this incomparable, robust individual who has so many characteristics and positive qualities. So I know that's kind of the monkey in my brain that still probably hasn't left the building of, telling me, what to worry about and what to fear. But I'm slowly, like you said, this is a process that I think we continually work through and try to, change for the better. And I learned a lot about compassion through the family program and kind of just, listening to these other conversations that you guys are having and, meeting more people who are in recovery. I think your heart really softens to the struggles that these folks have. And that's something I'm really grateful for, having had this experience.
I am too. I just feel like in so many ways, I'm such a much better person for having had the privilege of walking through this with Maz, just
Yeah.
between the two of us, and then also in this larger platform of these conversations.
Right.
Because, gosh, it's just a thing, and it's an enormous thing. Don't anyone hear me saying, oh, alcoholism's not that big a deal. It's a huge deal. And I believe, Melissa, that I can safely speak for both of us that we were never in physical harm with our spouses when they were drinking. I mean, there wasn't, so it wasn't that, but just the emotional toll that having an addict takes on you is profound. So,
Yes. Yep.
so to treat it as if it's not a big deal is a huge mistake. But
Yes.
it's also just a deal. Do you know what I mean? So like somebody
Mhm.
else's deal is my spouse lost his job. And somebody else's deal is, boy, my kid can't get through college. And somebody else, I mean, we all have
Yes.
our disappointments and our stresses and our relationship challenges. But
Right.
we have, I think, culturally made alcoholism such a separate thing. And I think it's because it kind of falls into a mental health category and we don't know what to do with that, because why don't you just get happy? You're depressed, just be happy. I'm happy.
Yeah, take
You-
this pill, you'll be
Yeah,
fine.
you drink, just quit drinking. I
Right.
don't know.
Yep.
Well,
Yes.
it's
Like,
not
yeah, I
that
can stop after one. Why can't you? Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. So the
Yeah.
complexity of it, I think, makes us more compassionate because we have lived with all of the diverse challenges of it. And we know that it's not something you just pick up and set down.
Right. No, not at all. No, that's a really beautiful way to put it. And I think, again, the more we discuss, I think, I remember learning about kind of the symptoms of this disease through the family program, lying, hiding alcohol, making it the centerpiece of your life. And I remember just thinking like, oh my gosh, because I had so personalized everything that Grant was doing and thought, well, if he knew how much this bothered me, he would stop. And so it became kind of like I was creating myself as the victim and not really understanding like these are just symptoms of a disease, as like, diabetics have certain side effects to their disease. And this is how it is. And so that kind of switch in my brain was really essential to kind of developing that compassion.
Mhm.
And I still think unless you've kind of had your passenger seat to somebody's addiction, it's very hard to not have that check of like, well, why didn't they just stop? Why
Uh-huh.
didn't they just, go seek treatment? And when you are loving somebody that's kind of in the throes of it, you realize, it's not how this works, unfortunately. So for me, it's been really, really helpful to think of this as a health issue, like diabetes, like somebody who can't process gluten, like, anything where we don't control how our brain reacts to an addictive substance, and so if you can stop after one, congratulations, you are not addicted to alcohol. And rather than say like, well, you're morally superior to somebody who's been struggling with an
Right.
addiction.
Yes.
And I do love when, people in recovery from all walks of life talk about it, because, we have, a lot of medical friends that are struggling with these issues. Attorneys are certainly not immune to substance use disorders, and, professors and professional runners. And I mean, it
Yeah.
can come in all stripes. And I think when people can shake that stereotype of what an alcoholic is,
Mhm.
we help everyone.
Yes, even people who have no reason, no personal reason to invest in the empathy and
Right.
compassion that comes of understanding it. I mean, I think so. My stepdad died almost 9 years ago, and I was with him and my mom when we were in the oncologist's office, and he got his "you have 2 weeks to 2 months to live" diagnosis at the
Mhm.
end. And, at no point did we ever say to him, well, why didn't, like, what did you do to earn this?
Right.
We
Yes.
didn't do that. He did nothing to get the
Yeah.
horrific cancer he got. And
Yeah.
all we really did from that diagnosis until the terminal point was to lift him up and to support him and to read about it and see if we could provide additional medical or non-medical resources, and
Yeah.
all of that. We went into immediate, let's make this as good as we possibly can mode, as opposed to
Yes.
what the hell is the matter with you? I told you were a drunk. I was right. You were wrong. You are the terrible person I told you were, and that you think you are. I mean,
Yes.
the judgment and the lack of empathy that we have both for the people who we can be closest to, and for addicts in general, is just astonishing. Just astonishing.
Yes.
So I guess that's a long answer to just agree with you that the more we can talk about it, the more we can humanize it. You don't meet Grant Severson and go, boy, that guy's a jerk. Or boy, that guy's weak. Or boy, I would never let my children be seen by him. Or you don't think any of that.
Right.
You realize
Oh,
that he's an
yeah.
imperfect person, like we all
Yeah.
are. You're an imperfect person,
Yep.
and so am I.
Yeah.
Yep.
Not
Yes.
much, but a little.
Yeah. I was going to say I've still got the roads, so you can suck it.
Yeah. So, Melissa, I'm curious to know what are the that you want to talk about? What are the sort of long-term effects? So Grant is coming into his 4th year of sobriety shortly.
Yes. Yeah.
What are the pieces, like what are the triggers for you? Because I definitely still have little things that Maz
Yeah.
will do where I will go back 4 years, despite the fact that we've had 4 amazing years, almost.
Absolutely. Yep. That's 100% what it's like for me too. So what kind of how I developed as he was in his addiction and in his active addiction is that I tried to control every little situation thinking that it would make a difference. So I would you know, hide, alcohol or make sure we didn't have it where I couldn't see it. And, not really understanding that somebody who's in an active addiction is going to find some way to get what they want. So I would try to do that. I also tried to keep everything like really even keel, thinking that, if the kids were fed, if I got them where they needed to, if we were in 4 million different activities so that he didn't really have to, deal with the stress of parenting, that I could somehow control our home life enough so that he wouldn't be triggered to drink. And so I tried to keep everything, just as even keel as possible. And thinking that like, well, I can prevent, this. And I still can get kind of ripped right back into that headspace of, Grant is he's a really high energy person on most days. And so he goes through a lot of ebbs and flows of his, personality and mood. And I still will be like, you're too happy right now. This is a little too excited. Like, can you please like simmer down a little bit? Thinking, trying to manage his mood in a way where, because if anything, too up or too down feels scary for me still. So I think, and I would try, and I'm kind of a control freak by nature. I think it's hard to get out of that, mode when I'm at work and then bring it back to home. And so I try to do things that I think will, make a good home environment for everyone. And it can be really, really unhealthy. And I joke about it because, that's a way for me to lighten something that can actually come off as very shaming for both my husband and my kids and very controlling. And so I think one thing that's sort of helped is like remembering that there is not one blueprint for recovery. And so what looks like recovery for one person does not look the same for another. And so I remember thinking when he was, very early in treatment of like, all right, you got to go to 3 meetings a week. You got to journal every day. You got to go, like thinking that he had this recipe he needed to follow. And so even when he was starting treatment, I tried to control it. And so focusing on the fact that I can only really control me. I can, control my actions and my moods and my thoughts, but nobody else. So that was, that's something where I can easily get roped right back into it. In times of high stress, in times of, everybody's kind of all over the place, that can happen for me. There was, I think as you kind of are able to create a time space between when somebody was an active alcoholic and now, I think it becomes easier to talk about. But there was a time where I wouldn't let him sit on a certain spot in the couch because I thought like that was his drunk spot. And if I could like keep him out of that spot, then I could keep him sober. So I think you do all of these, what looks like from the outside, completely irrational behaviors. But when you're in the thick of it, it's all it's almost survival to try to mitigate the alcoholism. So
Well,
that's really what I'm struggling with.
yeah, that's so interesting because I feel like it's so out of control when you're in it. And
Yes.
I really like to control the thing. You just fill in the
Yes.
blank. There are very few
Right.
things
Yeah.
I don't want to control. But
Mhm.
to be forced, it's very kind of you to say nothing. To be forced into living in an out of control environment
Thanks for noticing.
is so, I mean, I felt like I was in a straitjacket every minute of every day because
Yes.
I couldn't control something I thought I understood, even though I knew I didn't understand it. So,
Yes. Yeah.
that control thing was not new to the alcoholism. That's a big piece of my personality. So then when you throw that into that out of control mix, it's very hard to let that go. I agree with you. I mean, there were
Yeah.
lots of things,
It's
Maz occasionally will say to me, I'll like, for instance, we will be talking about, well, what should we talk about this week? And I'll say, well, what if and I'll go on this kind of weird random bender about Monday's Daily Dose. And he'll go, uh-huh. And I almost instantly
Yeah.
break into a
I
full
don't know what
body
I'm laughing
sweat.
at. This is true.
I often burst into tears. I mean, all he says
Yes.
is UH. Uh-huh. But it is,
Yeah.
he says it with the tone that he used to say it. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
kind of getting emotional thinking about it.
Yeah.
I'm right back to February of 2016, where it was so bad that I see no hope in sight. I feel like I've suddenly been wrapped in saran wrap and I can't breathe. And I mean, it's incredible. It's incredible how
Yeah.
quickly that trauma comes back. And I do think it's not an overstatement to call it trauma. It was traumatic what you and I
Yes.
lived through and what spouses and children and
Yeah.
parents and colleagues, it's traumatic. And you
It
don't just
is.
walk
No.
away from that.
No. No. Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that.
So, do you have questions? I'm sorry, I feel like I'm doing
No.
all the talking.
No, you go for it. This is actually, I mean, this is a good thing for the two of you to talk
That's true.
about. I mean,
That's
you know,
true.
Yeah.
What's your favorite thing about like sober Grant and Melissa?
Oh boy.
Sober family.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Like, so he's out of town this week. He's from Jamestown. He was staying at his parents' on Tuesday night, and then he was in Bismarck after his day at the Capitol yesterday, and then he has clinic in Bismarck today. So we were just FaceTiming last night, and there was kind of a lull in the conversation, and then he said to me, "You're really fun to talk to," and it was just kind of a moment of, wow, like we are actually connecting like two human beings in a relationship should be, where before the alcohol was always the elephant in the room. I always was wondering, like, is he going to be sober? Is he going to be passed out? Is he going to like not yet be drinking but wanting to, so just be in a really, really terrible mood? And so I felt like those were the three versions of Grant that I could get when he was an active alcoholic. But now I get this Grant that, has really brilliant, insightful things to say. He's the funniest person I know. So like, I know I'm guaranteed a laugh every single day out of him. And he just has this, peace about him. He's like, I feel like there's not words to describe how kind and generous he can be. And so that's really lovely to see. So I think that's kind of my favorite thing. We can just sort of be, and that's enough right now. And I love that. And I really felt, you know, for the longest time, I felt like he would never enter recovery because it sounded to me impossible that he would ever be able to stop drinking. Because I remember, like, I knew nothing about addiction. I maybe should have mentioned that. This was so out of my wheelhouse. I didn't even have a word for it. I would just call it Grant's weird thing where he like drinks in the basement and I don't know why.
Yes.
And
I mean, don't you wonder about that? You're smart. How did we not know to call it alcoholism?
I know.
I had no idea.
Right. I could have like one pamphlet. I could have read one pamphlet and like, you know, figured this out.
And one Google search. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. So so that's what's, you know, a little bit strange to me. And I kind of lost my train of thought, but
sorry.
No, that's fine. This is good for me. But I think, you know, going from just feeling like I was in this very bizarre situation that I didn't understand to just, you know, being able to like have fun with my best friend. That's probably what is the very best about Sober Grant.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's a fantastic answer.
That's really lovely. What would you say? Not about Grant and Melissa.
Well, I think it's, you know, the fact that we can actually have conversation. I mean,
Yeah.
I am aware, and I'm painfully aware that sometimes I really don't mean to do it. I'm not trying to say I'm going to suck it to Dana by sitting here and go, I don't try and do that. And I've got the good grace, I think, to mostly remember that if Dana's kind of acting a bit, as I would say, odd, it's my fault.
Well, it's triggered by something you've done. It's not necessarily.
When I first got sober, Dana would demand to know what I was doing downstairs, of course, because I used to drink. But what I was doing at the time was I was actually, for the first time in a long time, paying attention to what happened to Dana's leggings and sports bras and not put them in the dryer. And that actually, attention is actually quite a time-consuming thing to do.
Oh, funny.
So I was sitting there with like Dana's foundation garments, and she was at the door going, "What's going on?" I go, What? What's happening here? I want to do everything right.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I honestly think the you know, coming up on 4 years sober myself, it's just every day is just nicer.
Yes.
I have a calmness about me because I'm not inadvertently trying to drink myself to death. I'm just happy, and I know Dana's happy, and I know we're happy together.
Yeah, I think what you said, Melissa, is true. That just that notion of it, just the mundane is enough. I mean, all the other pieces that come with it are fabulous, but just that a regular 10-minute conversation is present and cogent and invested, and that is enough.
Yes. And that's what I kind of love, how in AA, the centerpiece of your recovery is gratitude. And I think, like, as much as you can cultivate gratitude for, you know, like you said, the mundane, I think that's sort of what keeps this going for us, is that, you know, I can be now grateful that we had a FaceTime conversation that, you know, didn't erupt with us yelling at each other. And that's something for me to be grateful for. So yeah.
Well, and I would just say, because I think one of the things we try really obviously to do with Daily Dose is to take it out of the realm of alcohol addiction, because that's not everybody's problem, and just translate it to life. And you'll never be a worse person for cultivating gratitude in your life. Never.
Yeah.
Right.
That's just a pure win across the board.
Yep. 100%.
Yeah. Mundane really is life. Wow. So how do you then just be appreciative of that? Well, Melissa, this has been
as always fantastic.
Yeah. I so appreciate you joining us and sharing your story. I know that you and I are kind of at the same time span in terms of our understanding of this. I mean, we have so many commonalities to both how we understand addiction, all these things. Mm-hmm. But I feel like you are in many ways much further down the path than I am. in part because you went through family treatment and you did some other things that gave
Yeah.
you, I think, your own language, your own vernacular, your own ability to dig into things, which I didn't get. So I so appreciate you as a role model of just how to keep exploring, how to keep questioning, how to keep trying to not judge myself for the pieces of this relationship that I fail at. Because
Oh,
everyone knows when you're in with an addict, it's not just the addict
Yeah.
that has things to work on.
well, I will say everything you said back to me. I mean, you've been a role model for me as well. So I think we can each have pieces that we can grow and learn from each other. So I appreciate you. I think you're doing an amazing job. I would not call you less further along on a path. I think you're, doing your own walk in a really amazing way. So I appreciate you quite a bit.
Thank you. So my last recommendation to you is get your vaccine as soon as you can so that the four of us can do
Yes,
something together.
I know. So we can, right.
Yeah, 'cause
Yep,
it's been way
Yeah,
too
so-
long.
it has.
I mean, yeah, we'll have to look into whether or not, if you've had COVID, if you can still get the vaccination.
You know what? One of us is a doctor. We'll ask him.
Yes.
Right.
Or we can ask your husband. We don't even have to Google.
Right.
We can ask
We
the
can
MD.
know,
right to the source.
He's like our walking website. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you both so much.
Thank you,
Thank
Melissa.
you, Melissa.
We'll talk
Always,
soon.
always great to talk to you.
All right. Take care. Bye bye.
Everybody else, we'll see you
See you
tomorrow.
tomorrow.
Thanks so much.
Okay. Sounds good.